Pick 230 in the 2025 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions went back to the defensive side of the ball, selecting safety Dan Jackson, who's a very interesting prospect because on one hand, you get elements of his game that you say this really needs to improve to find a way to make the roster, find a way to have an impact on this team for the first season, whether that be special teams or defense. But then there's also other elements of his game that I actually graded pretty darn highly for a seventh-round pick that I wouldn't have expected that the Lions could be buying into, especially for a higher floor element. So let's get right into it. So today we're going to be talking about safety Dan Jackson, a six-year senior who's a walk-on, got his opportunity to really become a full-time starter this past season. But even this past year, there was some things that he battled through getting on the field consistently. One game, he didn't even play in the first half this past year. As the season progressed, we got to see a little bit more nickel usage. He got to get utilized a little bit more in the slot, and he was typically a guy that was on the field this past year. Statistically speaking, he broke out, of course, because he was on the field. 67 total tackles, had 2 interceptions, also had 3 pass breakups. This is an older prospect as a six-year senior that you have some expectations that he's going to play the game a little bit faster. He's going to understand what he's seeing a little bit faster, and you definitely get that sense from Dan Jackson when you watch him. But he's such an intriguing case here for a guy that tested this well, that's physically really well built, that just has some areas that are glaring that need massive improvements, but also some things that are like, I don't know how he got that in the 7th round. Dan Jackson's going to be really fun to follow as we go through his career with the Detroit Lions. So let's get right into this. We're talking about a 6 foot, basically 6 foot flat, 194-pound safety that tested in with a 4.46 40 at his pro day. That's what it's listed as. 34-inch vertical, 7.123 cone drill. Now, the problems that he had with testing is that he has very short arms, just under 30 inches, and also very small hands, under 9 inches. And unfortunately, that really shows up when you see his ability to block shit. Now, I think his hand usage could get better, and he shows a lot of physicality, but as a run defender, he is not nearly as impactful as he should be, and it also leads to concerns on special teams as well, whether that be lead blocking, finding a way to latch, finding a way to sustain blocks, which doesn't showcase that often from what I had seen, but specifically on coverage units as well, being able to get to a spot where he's shedding blocks and being a consistent tackler versus what he is now, a guy that will miss a ton of tackles. So Dan Jackson is a very interesting prospect, and we'll start first with that 3-level ability, his ability to play at all 3 levels, and this is an area where I ended up going slightly above average. He did showcase that he could play everywhere on the field, essentially any assignment that you want to put him in. Line him up as a man piece in the slot. A lot of times he'd have the running back from the safety position. He'd also match up with tight ends pretty well. I thought he did those 2 things pretty well. Wasn't as great on receivers as we'll talk about, but you could put him in those spots. You could line him up in the slot. You could also put him in the box and feel very comfortable with his ability in underneath zone coverage, or also his ability to bail out, potentially disguise coverage, play with a lot of discipline wherever you put him alignment-wise, that he was going to do his job, and he wasn't going to get over-aggressive to kind of pull himself out of play, specifically in coverage. The 3-level ability was noticeable that he felt pretty comfortable wherever you threw him on the field, and a lot of it came back to some of the movement skills, some of the smoothness that we saw in his lateral slides, the adequate body control that he also brought, the lightweight footwork, which allowed him to transition pretty well, right? Kind of move really light on his toes, show some foot quickness in short area spots. Now, the big problem that he had, and some ways this was good, some ways it wasn't, was angles. And you specifically think about the 3-level ability, the more you put him down into the box, or when he is kind of the last line of defense, you give him to spots where his angles were just way too aggressive, working downhill specifically. He would allow way too many bounce opportunities for running backs. He'd get his nose kind of caught inside. Guys would bounce outside. He wasn't great at setting the edge with his hands either, so that could lead to some problems. So you'd get very hit and miss run angles. The way that he would fill the alley would be a little bit late at times. It wouldn't actually give an opportunity to make a play. He'd get a little bit indecisive. You felt like at times, was he going to pull the trigger? Was he going to go? Versus when you're having that more deep safety alignments, I actually felt pretty confident with him not being over aggressive to the point where he wasn't going to make tackles in space, where he was just going to be too flat to the ball. And he showed some of that true closing speed when he was in some of those spots. But even the angles that he would take to the catch point was inconsistent as well, just not always finding receivers. So angles tend to be a little bit of an issue when going through Dan Jackson's game, but specifically you'll see it when he's working downhill. Lateral scrape quickness for me was closer to below average. I didn't think this was great. While he was pretty light on his feet with some quickness, I just didn't think laterally he moved incredibly well. It was less explosion to his game, more so than anything. There wasn't a great burst to his game that you felt like, especially when you felt him moving laterally, which I think also showed up much more in man-covered situation. Very high-energy type of player. This is the kind of player that just has a relentless pursuit to the football. Most of the plays, if he's not making a play on the ball, at the end, you're going to see number 17s around the football for whatever reason, because he has that kind of pursuit to the ball. He really flows well with the play, and he also flows well with the quarterback's eyes when it's pass play. So he does a great job of kind of just ending up around the ball a lot of times. To see his footwork be a little bit more sudden than it is right now. Sometimes not always that concise. Again, you lack some of the burst. Don't feel like he's always as sudden as you would like to see through some of his transitions as mover. It's much more fluid. fluid than it is sudden right now, which is definitely okay for a safety. I like having fluid safeties that can transition, can open their hips, right, can turn and run down the sideline, especially for a single high safety, cover three, cover one. Can I put you in a spot, trust you to have some of that range? I definitely love the fluidity aspect. You just get a little bit less of kind of that downhill explosion or lateral explosion when you watch him. That said, though, what I do like is his ability to adjust when he is in a deep safety alignment, his ability to adjust as a tackler. He can kind of shift up some of his angles while also playing with some aggression, working towards the football in those spots. He has really legitimate center fielder vision. I think this is the area where he feels very comfortable, right? When he can play center field, really play through the quarterback's eyes, understanding that he may have the full field in certain spots, but ultimately he does feel like that's what he's kind of made for, is to be able to play in those spots where he can really work through the quarterback's eyes, play with that kind of consistency in his vision. And that was the big key, was just consistency and the depth that he would play with when he was put in those single high alignments for me. He does give out outside contain, as touched on, when he has some poor filling angles. You also put him in the box and he sifts through traffic pretty darn well. He does this on screens, and when he can kind of work through traffic, work through just a mess, he can also do it between the tackles. Now, again, he'll let guys outside, and at times I'm like, I don't know why he's even trying to get inside here. But when he is working between the tackles, he does have an ability to find the football in those spots when it does end up there. And then also once he gets in between the tackles, like, he's playing downhill. So a lot of times he's knocking guys backwards rather than the other way around. Football intelligence, the instincts that he plays with, to me, this is in a good spot. I think you would expect this a little bit more with his age. But the big thing is, I think there's a distinction. I think he's a very smart player that doesn't always feel like the instincts tap as much as I would like to see. I felt later in the season, truly, that he felt much more instinctually sound. I thought against Texas the second time around when he faced them, Notre Dame in the final game this past season for him, in those couple of games, I thought his instincts played a lot better. I thought he moved a lot faster from the safety position. I just thought there was a much more instinctual feel to his game, where he was trusting it, he was rolling, and allowed him to add a little bit more playmaker upside than what you consistently see. But from a football intelligence side, his feel for the game is really strong. I think a lot of times he knows what's happening. You'll see it as a communicator pre-snap. I think he's a very strong communicator pre-snap, gets guys aligned pretty darn well. Now, he'll get a little tunnel vision at times, and I don't think always do a great job on the move in communication spots or when the play is already snapped. But for the most part, I do think that he's a pretty smart player when he's on the field. Just being over aggressive, and specifically you'll see this like on play action fakes. He's got a very quick trigger to step down, play run support, and occasionally he can be a little bit over aggressive in these spots, pull himself slightly out of place, but not completely. He still has an ability to get back in plays, and he's pretty comfortable retreating, right? Getting back into a half turn, flipping, trying to chase guys downfield, find routes on the move. He's pretty comfortable in those spots, but he could be a little bit over aggressive there. He works through stacks really well in terms of like route combinations, man coverage that's pre-snap, but it's also post-snap as well, just being able to keep track of who his assignment was. I think he has a sense for other routes that kind of work through the play that are beyond where he's actually assigned to, which is nice as well, and that gives him a little bit more range as a pure single high safety. Now, I don't think this is always great, again, when guys get on the move and he's got to kind of change on the move, right? He's got to follow players around and kind of running into rub routes and stacks and in pick plays. You can get him kind of running into some of the spots. He doesn't play with as much slither. He plays a little bit more wide when kind of track guys through traffic. I don't think it's great. You also see this one kind of his agility as well. We'll talk about this more for man coverage, but just that ability to kind of trace routes, it's not that natural to him. It doesn't look very natural. He loses a lot of space in those spots. And I think you'll see it when he's trying to work some of those tight traffic situations, specifically play through the flow, which is playing through the flow of the quarterback, playing through the flow of where his eyes go. This helps him a ton, kind of roam a little bit as a single high safety. I think it allows him to really excel because he can play a lot more rangy in those spots. He can find the ball relatively well behind the line of scrimmage to the point that you'd expect it. But the big thing there is there's a discipline to respect receivers getting the football. He does a nice job with jet sweeps, end arounds, being able to respect those and respect that those guys could get the football to get himself in a spot where at least he jumps himself outside, reverse plays. He plays a real respect to that, try not to let guys over top. That can allow things underneath, but he does show respect to different looks like that behind the line of scrimmage to try not to get burned over top. So it's good football intelligence to his game. The instincts to me are a touch lower just from the play speed. End up giving him an average grade. For that long speed, the 4.46, you'd hope this be a little bit better. And he does end up around the football a lot, so it feels like he's playing pretty darn fast. And I think a lot of it's just his effort. Some of the angles that he plays with are very tight, but the problem is once he gets to the ball, he doesn't make enough plays, which is kind of the double-edged sword there to him. But ultimately, I think he has average play speed right now, but this could improve with just cranking up some of his aggression. Like, honestly, just cranking up the aggression at times. For me, I love the effort that he plays with the run defender, the pursuit effort that he gives. It constantly leads him around the football. His plant and drive burst isn't great, right? So you think about off-man coverage, plant and drive, that transition transition isn't great. Again, he's not as explosive, against much more fluid than anything. Also tying into that, though, I don't think sometimes he's just proactive enough to just trust it and go, trust it and break on the football, jump routes. You'll see this in zone coverage where he doesn't really plaster routes. He kind of allows it to happen, and then he makes the play. Like, he's in a spot where he could make a play. He just, I don't think, always plays with that instinct to just go. And we started to see that towards the end of the season against like Texas, where he was in cover 3 and he read the quarterback's eyes, and the quarterback was watching the over route versus the third level throw. And because that, he never really drifted. Like, he got himself in a great position, but he ultimately planted and drove on the football, laid a big hit. Those are the kind of things you just don't see enough from his game. Got some swivel, though, when he's working through his angles as just a mover and some of his pursuit angles. He's got some swivel to his game. His lateral transition burst, again, is closer to average for me, but he's very balanced within his change of direction. He's a very balanced mover in that sense. You'll see this also in man coverage as well. He has the stride length to close, and this is where you do see the speed. He can really close on guys when he takes proper angles, or when he gets out in space, he can really close. Long speed, I don't think it's bad here, but I think he's a little bit more of a strider than kind of a short area piece, and I don't think it's bad here. I just don't think that he's over aggressive to getting to spots as single high safety, so he kind of plays his assignments more so disciplined, and that allows him to be in a spot where typically he does his job, but he's not always going above and beyond and flashing incredible play speed. So I think it's in a fine spot there. He's just more so going to be where you consistently expect him to be when he's in more of those assignments than anything. He also does a great job attacking quarterbacks when they take off. Again, he's got a quick trigger to get downhill. That is one thing that he does have. Now on screens, those are elements where I would like to see more aggression pop at times, where it's like he feels it, he kind of steps down, but he doesn't go all the way. He's like, I want to make sure that this isn't a fake screen or something along those lines. But in terms of when the quarterback gets out of the pocket, especially in his own coverage, when he gets to a point where he doesn't really have a receiver in his area, he's going to go, and that quick trigger plays out. I think when he's working downhill, the trigger flashes a lot more, specifically when he's working underneath zone coverage, right? Not like off man, or when he's in an off zone like a quarters, and it's like, all right, you can drive, but he may not actually do it. It's more so when he's like underneath cover 3 spots, where he's in spots where he's actually allowed to be aggressive, where he's stepping down. The routes become a little bit more like, okay, you're going top down on everything. Then you see his aggression really pop. You see the play speed kind of take off, and that's where he's attacking quarterbacks when they get out of the pocket. He has a little bit of wiggle to his game. He's also truly got makeup speed for tight ends. Now, he sets himself up poorly at times early. He's got some contact. We'll talk about that more, but he does have true makeup speed, where tight ends and running backs, he actually matches up pretty darn well in terms of just like simplified routes. Like, oh, he's going to run an over route. Like, he can run with those things. He can make up in those spots, even if he gets himself behind. It's also great for like, hey, if he is aggressive to play action, he is in underneath zone, can he open his hips and then chase a guy down? And a lot of tight ends, he's going to chase down just by some of that straight line speed in general. So it is a nice little thing to kind of have in his back pocket a little bit, but he's just not overly twitchy. His recovery burst, for me, kind of that first step, isn't necessarily there either. Occasionally, I think he needs to get out and bail sooner. Like you'll get him in some quarter assignments where I think he just needs to get out and go. Sometimes I feel like he's a little bit sluggish to take off, open his pads, open his hips, and take off cover 2, where you can potentially allow guys to get over top occasionally in those spots where he's not directly lined up on top receiver. Cover 2 is not a great example of that unless he's kind of disguising it, but there are assignments where he's not directly over top, but I feel like he'll need to bail a little bit quicker. He shows it occasionally, like in palms coverage, but sometimes I feel like just a touch, he needs to bail a little bit faster, get out a little bit quicker, because he doesn't have some of that immediate burst when he does transition, so it can allow guys to create stack opportunities. As a man coverage, going through this, I totally understood what Ray Agnew was saying and being better in zone than in man coverage right now. In man coverage, for me, I think that he's below average, maybe even slightly below average, right? You can give him a little bit of a higher nod because he did have a plenty of man coverage assignments. It wasn't like he didn't do it and you're just not sure. He had plenty of man coverage assignments. He did a solid job on tight ends for the most part. Running backs, he did a pretty good job of, but I didn't think he was tested that much there. Receivers, that's not great for him, but depending on the assignment, he could play his leverage pretty well. There's things that he does well, man, but for the most part, this is where you just get too much separation too consistently here. He does have a pretty smooth gather, and you can see this when he's working downhill from like an off-man coverage assignment. He has some balance at the top of the routes, right? He's typically pretty light on the toes, plays some balance. He doesn't feel very heavy in some of his transitions with his nice. The problem is his closing burst is average, makeup burst is average. We'll also see he constantly gives up way too much separation at the top of the route, dealing with like tight route cuts, even on tight ends, like, oh, there's a corner route. He doesn't stick with those that well. I think one thing is that you'll see as well here is in terms of his transitions, he's very protective. He's very protective over top. He tends to give a lot of space to snap things back off underneath. In zone, he doesn't really plaster routes. And in man, he gives a little bit too much space. He gets in a lot of those kind of like, okay, side shuffle positions. And in that spot, when he does transition, he just gives ground or gets himself flipped. He doesn't play as low. He doesn't play as much bend in terms of that fluidity to transition. So tends to lead to him kind of flipping his hips a lot of times and not being able to actually stick and kind of plaster through routes as they get through breaks. I think this is why you see it up as when he's tracing routes, he gets their problems when he has to work from underneath and got to track guys. It just doesn't look fluid at all. And I think you see it at the top of the routes as well. He gives ground here. He's much more in terms of giving space than trying to recover than he's going to kind of just stick on a guy's hip and match with him through the route. That's just not his game right now, at least. I would like to see at times to be maybe a little more proactive to try to jump routes when he has the opportunity from off-man coverage. He can really attack the pace of a route. He does a pretty nice job kind of sensing a route pace. It's very fluid from going to a pedal to a half turn. When a receiver is going to transition vertically, he's going to break it into a level 3 route. He's pretty smooth at being able to recognize that, pick up on it, and react to those spots. The problem is his hips will just declare too early for me. He doesn't have some of the great patience in man coverage either, which leads to just too much space given up. And he's choppy in trail coverage, as I mentioned as well. He's just not sticky working through transition at this point in time. As ready as he can play, it's just not as sticky. I think he's below average here right now, slightly below average. Now, zone coverage, this ended up being a much higher grade than I would have expected. Going through his grades, seeing where I'm at to this point, a lot of things are around the average, and I gave him a above average grade, a strong above average grade actually at this point. We'll see where it is with the final rankings, but I think he's close to a very good zone coverage piece. Again, if the aggression cranked up at times underneath and deeper, I think he would have a very strong grade here because he does get to his spots a lot of times pretty darn well. His angles also become a little bit inconsistent here, but for the most part, there's a lot to like. First off, he does find route development pretty darn early when he's working in zone coverage. I love it when he's working split field assignments. If he's working cover 4, his ability to kind of recognize route leverage, feel it early, step on top of it early, working underneath coverage, stepping underneath routes very early on plays. I love that. His pedal is very fluid. He's got the loose hips when he's working single high to kind of fluid, just transition, work back and forth, back and forth. Kind of feels like he's on a nice little string there to transition pretty smoothly. Stay on top of his routes really darn well. If that's his assignment to stay on top, he's not going to let guys just run behind him, especially in those single high looks, which adds a lot of discipline to what you expect. His vision thrives when he's in single high coverage, when he can play through the quarterback's eyes and allowing his ability to see everything in front of him, where he does a nice job of keeping everything in front of him and playing with a really nice flow to the football and dropping off routes that are really not in a position to be impactful on the play because the ball got too far away and giving support to other spots. You'll see this in split field coverage as
tend to love his spacing. You'll see that here in cover 2, how he spaces himself over top, reads through the quarterback's eyes. Now, in terms of covering up one-on-one, it's the lack of balance at the top of the route that becomes an issue.
Is bailing out in coverage. He will lose kind of where the football is. That will happen. He also can tend to get fooled by the quarterback's eyes as well. I think the big problem there is when he gets in the spots where he's really just playing zone. He doesn't kind of have a balance going on as much with his eye balance. He's really just kind of floating in zone. That's where he'll get fooled by eyes. You'll see this in underneath coverage when he's got guys behind him where he's very reactive where a quarterback looks. At times it's great because he undercuts routes. He steps underneath things, just playing through quarterback's eyes and where the field is going. It's great. But other times he can get him into spots where quarterbacks can just simply move him off the route because I don't think the eye balance always shines as much in those spots.
However, there's a lot of good that comes from like these 2-man assignments, or if you think about in cover 3, where he can have a little bit more bracketed in responsibility, where he can see both ball and man and be able to balance those two things, and the flow becomes really strong.
Just kind of a feel for where the route is expected to go that he can't necessarily see. But what I do want to say about that is I think his eye balance is great. I think that he has great eye balance as a safety, right? His ability to bounce between quarterback, bounce between receiver, and specifically have a really good sense of kind of keeping those two things in play for him.
And he really varies the usage of his eye balance depending on the coverage. If it's an off man, leaning towards receiver. If it's a zone and it's a 2-deep cover 2, leaning towards the quarterback's eyes. The problem is that he can just lean a little bit too heavy towards man or receiver depending on that assignment.
Positioning that he plays with underneath consistently. His eye balance shines when he's able to kind of bracket receivers from the inside out. Doesn't get enough jumps from like a cover 3 spot that you would hope for, but I think that his zone coverage is going to be something that you're going to latch onto early and really like.
And Dan created a lot of situations where quarterbacks just wouldn't throw the ball, not because he was going to pick it off maybe, but just because he was in position. And I think that's where you got to see him thrive, was that underneath zone, the way that he just had a feel for his surroundings, sorting through traffic like bunches. Then even in spots like this where you're going to see him step down, then work to the number 1 receiver as the quarterback's eyes go there. The only knock is the angles. If he takes a better angle, maybe finds a receiver earlier, he could jump this, but the feel is so smooth and fluid.
It's not a bad thing for a team that plays a lot of man to have a guy they like in zone, because from a safety position, a lot of times those guys are in zone, right? It's not they're consistently lining up a man. They're more so in zone coverage responsibilities. The defense can be a man, but you can be a zone responsibility within a man coverage defense. In terms of ball skills, this was a weird one for me because I think he plays the ball. He can play the ball well. He also shows the ability to come down with the football when it's in the air. I just think right now he's much more average here in terms of tracking the football. football consistently. Good backstop. He's a very good backstop as a two deep safety. He settles in behind routes really well. He plays with really nice flow to finding the route. So overthrows, he gets himself at a lot of times in spots to take the ball away, which I think is one of the biggest strengths of safeties. His big strength in man coverage too is the ability to be a great backstop. It leads to a lot of interceptions. We see it a lot with our guys. Being a backstop, it's one of his best traits is taking the football away, I think. He also does a good job at the catch point. He gets his hands in the frame. He doesn't play with great length. Obviously, he just doesn't have great length. But the reason that works is because he's not like overly physical, that he's arriving early. He actually arrives with really good timing to the catch point, which leads to a lot of success there. He can high point pretty accurately as well, the timing to high point the football when he sees it. And he seems pretty comfortable going and snatching passes out of the air. The problem is angles are way too steep in coverage, and zone coverage are pretty steep when he's working underneath. You'll also see that when he's trying to connect with the receiver over top, he doesn't find the ball that early at all. Actually, he's just kind of tracking the receiver. He doesn't seem to find the ball that well when he's trying to track guys downfield. He's just more so going to play the receiver. We saw UMass, that huge play that one of our receivers had, one of our undrafted free agent signings had, was also on Dan Jackson not finding the football downfield. Consistent with those break angles for me specifically. He also allows receptions underneath too much. I wish he would plaster routes a little bit more. And again, the instincts don't flash here as often. So I think he's much more average in terms of ball skills. Things that I really like, he can take the ball away. I just don't think you're going to get as many like, oh man, I didn't see that coming. But his flow of the football leads him to getting around the ball a lot, like screens if he's matched up on the back, the way he kind of drifts through traffic. And he's also a relatively good athlete. When the ball does get tipped up in the air, he can be a little bit of a threat. So he can just kind of end up around the ball a lot, where things get tipped up into the air, things are overthrown. That's where he's going to make his money. So don't make mistakes around this guy's area, because he's going to be around the football. Physicality, now this is where the balance is weird. He is very physical. He has great physicality. He is very willing to stick his nose in. That's his game. He'll knock other guys out of the play. He's not really like, and he's a very smart player in this sense too. He's not a guy that's like, oh, there's a pile, let me dive into it, throw my head in, do something dumb, get a flag. He doesn't do that. He actually is like, I'm going to take the other guy out of the play. He's a very physical player that's smart. The problem is he doesn't tackle well. I think that he's close to a poor tackle. He doesn't tackle well. It's not that he's not willing. It's not that he hasn't made good tackles. I think his ankle tackling technique is adequate. I think he shows some success there, but man, he's not a great tackler. And then getting off blocks is a problem as well. He doesn't get off blocks really at all. And his stack and shed is it feels almost non-existent as a player. So from a physicality side of things, he's got a very quick trigger to get downhill. He attacks the alley and run support. He loves to do that, right? He's got a fearlessness to do it and just go. He also has a really good frame for take on, right? He's not a skinny guy. He's got a pretty good frame to him. He just isn't long at all. He doesn't have the hand size, and his hand usage is poor when he takes on blocks. He rarely ever gets off blocks. He doesn't hold an edge that well whatsoever at all. I don't think he drops his weight much as a tackler. He tends to kind of just, his butt pops up and he kind of ducks his head. There's not much of a dropping weight through his tackles. It leaves him to sliding off a ton of tackle opportunities. Slides off a lot. He also, I think, can lose vision of the ball carrier. His entry points in the tackle aren't great, where he's taking steep angles, but he also doesn't keep his eyes up and really settle and break himself down. So at that point, I don't think he lands really accurate strikes. He also isn't very forceful as a hitter downhill as much as you would think that he is. He's not as much. He's more of kind of like an upper body wrap-up piece, but he just slides off way too many tackles right now. Technically speaking, that needs a lot of work, and I don't think that he plays with the best bend. I think that's why it shows up in coverage, like to really sink himself down. He doesn't do that incredibly well. It's that he will kind of stay on his feet when he's in more close quarter situations. He just slides off tackles too often. He plays with really nice control in the box. He works from gap to gap with really nice control, can kind of slide down and scrape down the line of scrimmage pretty well, but he'll get sealed by move blockers. Again, you have to be more proactive, I think, when he's taking the angles that he does that aren't great, and that allows him to get sealed. He's got enough explosion in his body to enter and create a little bit of force. Thumper, I don't think he plays with great slither as of now to just avoid blocks entirely, but that will have to be maybe more so of his game if he isn't a better stack and shed piece very quickly, and he can lose vision to me on entry at times as well, but he will stick his nose in. He's going to find a way to just get involved in a lot of tackles. One game this season, he was listed for 10 tackles, and you could trust him a little bit more in the open field. He'll still miss tackles, but typically he's going to get contact. At very least, he's going to get contact. He just may miss some tackles out there. So I just think the tackling technique truly needs work. So he's a very physical player that doesn't tackle that well right now. And speaking to that, his ability to play with a lot of range is another area where, again, a very interesting one for me. I ended up giving him a good grade in terms of the range that he plays with. For me, the quick trigger downhill, the change of direction is pretty precise when he's working downhill. downhill. It's pretty smooth when he's able to change direction, adjust angles. I think his control is really nice from a single high spot. Again, the 3-level abilities there. He's got a fluid back pedal. His broken play feel is really nice as well, right? His ability to kind of fly around and find the football. Now, not as much kind of plastering routes downfield, but just kind of find the football. Blitz timing is really strong as well. I think it's one of the best elements as a blitzer. I don't think he's a great blitzer, but he times it really well, and he has done it from the slot, and he's very tough. I just don't know how he's going to avoid blocks consistently. He has kind of thrown himself at blocks, but I don't know how he's going to do that or how he's going to close if he doesn't tackle well. But in terms of timing, he does play with really good timing to attack and jump the snap count. That finds some success. There's a pretty nice feel to that as well. But just ending up around the ball leads to good range. And then finally, for special teams, a lot of the things that we talked about is why there's like, okay, he looks like a special teamer because he's tough as nails. He does run really fast. Like, he can play pretty fast. He finds himself around the ball. He's got a kind of a nose for the football. The problem is like, technically speaking, he's got to clean up a lot of things. You got to be able to shed blocks better, be a better tackler one-on-one. Like, he can't just be missing tackles all over the place. But he'll be a guy that's going to create a pile, and he'll get into a pile and help you bring guys down. And he played a lot of key special teams roles for Georgia this past year, right? On punt return team, he was kind of a safe piece that a lot of times they would drop out for potential fake punts. Also could lead the way on blocks, though blocking-wise, I have concerns with his ability to latch and sustain guys. But he's very much so a finisher. He'll finish to kind of everything. Kickoff team as well, he was utilized. And that's the biggest thing was that did well is that he would get angles pretty darn well because he'd fly downhill and he could change his angles really well. So as long as he's disciplined there, you can find success. It could be a little bit different in the NFL, but he looks like a special teamer, but the technique aspects feel like they have to get a lot stronger. The weird thing about Dan Jackson is I actually think he's much stronger in certain areas of like, oh, wow, he actually could play safety right away. And I think he's actually in a good spot to make the team, not because of special teams, but actually because of what you like about him on defense and because you feel like you're going to get a pretty reliable piece. It's just, can we get more playmaking and how much versatility can we truly tap into as a man coverage piece? Because right now, I can put him on a lot of different assignments, but how much can we trust him in man? And then can we get better as a run defender? That's going to be important. But from a testing and physical side, you're going to like all those things. He's just an older prospect. And that is Dan Jackson. Grades will be on the screen. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you, Pride, for watching, and I'm out.